Does God care about our speech? We start reading the New Testament, we begin to realize He does care about the words that we speak. We're going to give an answer for every idle word that has come out of our mouth. We better get ready for the judgment day. Not just the deeds we've done, but the words that we have spoken. And in this context of Matthew 12, in the idle word, you say, well, if we're going to have to give answer to judgment, it wasn't so idle, was it? It did produce condemnation to me. But these people had blasphemed the Holy Spirit, saying that the prince of Beelzebub was behind the miracles of Jesus, and they profaned, they spoke against the power that indeed was involved in that miracle. They were not good in their heart, and therefore the words came out as being evil. It was an idle word, something they just threw out there to get around an argument. Had no really meaning to them. And we're going to give an answer for those types of words that we have spoken in life. Does God care about our speech? Yes, He does. Even in our study of James, in this series of lessons, we have observed that God cares about our words. Oh, I know sometimes we'll speak when we shouldn't speak because we're angry. I'm talking about the character of our words we see in James 3, that out of the mouth comes blessing, speaking goodwill to someone, or we are also cursing. We might bless God, but we'll curse man who's made in the image of God. We did not escape God, did we? But there is the image of God, there's man, and we'll curse him, and out of that same mouth, that same opening, we'll bless God and curse man who's made in His image. Brethren, it ought not be so, James says, as he speaks to the people of God. Apparently, God's people can have a problem with their speech that James says it's important we care about. God cares about our oaths this evening. In James, the 5th chapter, verses 12 and 13, we observe that James is speaking about swearing. He's speaking about oaths, and it's pretty urgent. And above all things, he's about to say something. And above all things, my brethren, he's speaking to the church. Above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, nor by the earth, nor by any other oath. But let your yea be yea, and your nay, nay, that ye fall not under judgment. We speak here about swearing. So we are swearing, that's the action being done, and the oath is the noun that we're connected with. What is swearing? What do we mean by swearing? Well, what we see is that when we're swearing, we're affirming something. We're affirming something to be true. We're emphasizing it by invoking the name of God. A lot of times in our oaths, that's an oath before God. Sometimes we are making a promise to someone or to a group of people. That's swearing. And we're invoking some authoritative name. You can't get any higher than God. And so we invoke God into our oaths. And you ask the question, is James condemning that? And this evening we want to examine that. It sounds like, above all things, don't you ever swear, so you don't fall into judgment before God and fall into condemnation. Is that true? Is that what our Bible teaches? What is James, if that's not the case, what is James and even Jesus Christ condemning? This evening we're going to explore that. And what we begin to observe is that he says, swear not. He says, by heaven or by earth. That sounds like Jesus. That's what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount. Why not? Do you escape God? No, that's where heaven dwells. The earth is His footstool. How did you escape God? See, a Jew would never want to to bring in God's name in anything, so we'll just swear by heaven. We'll swear by the earth. As Jesus said, that's the footstool. That's where his throne is, and is in heaven. You didn't escape God. And it's by earth. That's the footstool of his feet. You didn't escape him at all. But James says, by heaven and earth or any other oath. And that word other doesn't mean different. It means of the same kind. Like kind of oaths. Like Matthew 5:35, he adds not only heaven and earth, but now he says by Jerusalem. By Jerusalem. Why can't I say, I'll swear by Jerusalem? Well, that's the city of the great king, and that wasn't David and Saul. Psalm 48, 1 and 2, that's God. That's where his throne is. Psalm 48, 1 and 2, that's where he dwells. It is the city of God. In the sense of that's where his sanctuary was, were the Jews. That's where his presence was. So I didn't get around God because I don't want to invoke his name. But I went heaven and earth and Jerusalem, and God is tied to all three. That's Jesus, and that's James. And oaths of this kind are being condemned. And his point is, just tell the truth. Let your yea be yea, your nay, nay. Why do you have to bring in an oath for everything in common life, where you're living your life, and you just bring in an oath, and maybe have no meaning at all in your life? Just throw it in there in order to make it real strong. And it really could just be, I'll just tell you the truth. My word will be my bond. That's how serious I take my words. But a lot of times we wanted to take it to another level. And we want to say, I swear by God. But I don't want to use its name. And so I'll swear by heaven, earth, Jerusalem. By the hair of my head. I just find some way to bring forth something more important than just my words. James is not condemning oaths, and we'll see that in a moment. He's condemning the kind of oaths where we use God's name or things connected with God in a way that's not real serious. And sometimes we think we can tell a lie. And they were doing that with their oaths. They don't have to keep their promise. They don't have to be telling necessarily the truth, because they didn't use things that indeed would condemn them. But James says, don't you swear all these types of oaths, you tell the truth, that you fall not under judgment. Now that's James. That's kind of the outline of that. But when we observe avoiding God in oaths, let's just take it to that level. Are we to avoid God in oaths? Paul, did you do that? I call God for a witness. Oh my, did Paul sin? He's taken an oath. He's swearing by God. And the reason Paul uses this is the fact that there's some things that only God and Paul would know. I call God a witness for my soul, that to forbear you Corinthians, I did not come like I promised I would. Oh, I had made plans to give you 2 opportunities this evening. I would come to you first, and then I'll give you a second blessing. I will come the next time. Now, was I fickle because I changed my mind and changed my plans? And of course, the enemies of Paul said, you can't trust him. He's always changed his mind. He is fickle. He said, my testimony, the gospel is not fickle. It's yea. It's not yea and nay. But he lets them know something. Just to let you know that I wasn't fickle. I call God for a witness that to forbear you, I did not come to Corinth. It was serious. It was a serious moment. And who would know? Who would know the heart of a man? That deep down, this is how he really feels about the situation. No one would know. I tell you who would, God. And Paul said, I call him for a witness. Oh, he didn't do it just once. He did it more than once. In Philippians, the first chapter, in verse 8, the Apostle Paul is addressing the Philippians, and again, he brings something that's ought to be important to the people. It's important to Paul. But he says in Philippians 1 and verse 8, for God is my witness. Oh, Paul, you're not supposed to use God's name in affirming truth. Let your yea be yea. Just say yes. Just say, I long after you in the tender mercies of Christ. I tell you the truth. My word's my bond. But Paul didn't do that. For God is my witness. How I long after you all in the tender mercies of Christ Jesus. Who would know that? Who could stand up and say, yep, that's true? God. And he wanted them to understand that indeed he calls God as a witness. That to affirm the fact, this is how I care about you. Serious. But what about your idea, don't swear at all, James? You and Paul got a problem? I thought maybe we had a problem with Romans 4, James 2, but we've got another problem here. Because Paul's doing something that James says, swear not at all. Moses. Oh, we're going to the Old Testament here. Yes, we are. We're going to look at a principle. And it's always been there with God's people. God is telling Moses, you direct the people. You fear Jehovah, you serve Jehovah, and you swear by the name of Jehovah. Oh, well, we don't do that today. We got to fear and we got to serve, but swear not at all. Paul did it. Moses, with the authority of God behind him, puts that as one of the three things he demands his people to go do, especially when they go into the land of promise. And as they enter into that land, you fear Jehovah, you serve Jehovah, and you swear in the name. Well, we don't use the name of Jehovah. Why not? Moses said, do it. Was God telling them to sin? Did all of a sudden become a sin after the cross? Paul didn't get the message, did he? Jesus. Oh, what an opportunity. You're in a court of law, Jesus. Jesus was in the court of law, the Sanhedrin. He had the chief priest involved in trying to get information out of him. He says, I adjure you. There's an oath. And Jesus had an opportunity to practice what he preached in Matthew 5, or at least teach a man how he ought to regard oaths. But this was a solemn oath that he wants Jesus to make in Matthew 26, because Jesus has been holding his peace. When he's not speaking out against what the people are accusing him of, he's holding his peace. And the high priest said, I adjure thee by the living God. I got God in there, and I got an oath. You tell us whether thou art the Christ, the Son of God. And Jesus was not silent. He was not silent. He said, you've spoken well. Thou hast said, because you have well said. No, Jesus, he's talking about an oath. You don't do that. You don't invoke the name of God. He did that. You should kind of go on that, and then you can say what you want to say. But he's silent, and all of a sudden he speaks out. He says, you've well said. Nevertheless, he says, you're not to swear at all. No, he doesn't say that. Nevertheless, I say unto you, henceforth ye shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming in the cloud of heaven. You're going to see the authority of God coming. Son of Man, same thing as Son of God, same one. And he's going to come. And Jesus didn't really have a problem with oaths right here. Moses surely didn't. He commanded it because he had God's authority behind it. And Paul is the one that is practicing that as well. Is really James said we're to avoid God in our oaths? God did this. God did this. God swore. Well, he has opportunity to do. He's God. He's the one we're trying to say we want to respect him. Well, he swore. Remember in Genesis 22, when that great test upon Abraham to offer up the promised son, and now we're going to offer him up on the altar. And when he showed his faith in God to obey God to the nth degree, God saw that. He said, I swear by myself, is how the Hebrew writer says in Hebrews 6:13. I'm swearing that I will bless you, and your seed I will bless. God swore. But he swore because the Hebrew writer said, you can't get any higher than God. But he wanted it to be an important fact upon the lives of people. And especially in Hebrews 6:13, the people that would come, that would be the people who would be involved in that blessing. He wanted them to have the confirmation to make it strong. He swore by himself that I will bless thee. And he did that for the sake of the inheritance. Notice with me that thought in Hebrews 6. Well, beginning with verse 13, for God, when he made promise to Abraham, since he could swear by none greater, he swore not at all. Nope. He swore by himself, saying, surely blessing I will bless thee, and multiplying I will multiply thee. Verse 17, wherein God, being minded to show more abundantly unto the heirs of the promise the immutability of his counsel, interposed with an oath, to be assurance that this is indeed, I will bless the seed of Abraham. Very important. God is invoked. He invoked himself. God swore. Jesus didn't condemn the high priest for swearing. In fact, he said, you well said. Moses commanded it, and Paul practiced it. Old Testament, Jesus, God, New Testament. And you tell me, James said, don't you ever swear. I got a problem with you. Because you got a problem with God's word. Avoiding God and oaths, that wasn't the problem. That's not what he's trying to condemn. He's dealing with the people who are avoiding the truth and fulfilling their promise in oaths. Here's what they did. They have a little loophole in this idea of their practice. And Jesus brings this out in Matthew, the 23rd chapter, verses 16 through 22. And when we put all of these things together, if you swear by the temple, that's pretty holy, isn't it? You swear by the temple, that is nothing. Did you hear that? Jesus says, this is what you Pharisees are doing. That is nothing. You just swore. It is nothing. It was something to Moses. It was something to Jesus. It was something to God. It was something to Paul. But you say, by the temple, it's nothing. But if you swear by the gold of the temple, you know, oaths are there, and they're there for a purpose, and they're there to give confidence that what you're saying is the true, and what you promise you're going to promise. You're a debtor. You're a debtor. No, you didn't say you're a sinner. He said you are a debtor. You now have to fulfill that promise, but I didn't have to do it if I said temple. That's the Jews of Jesus' day, and apparently that was a problem among the Christians too, that James is talking to. Another example. Swear by the altar, it's nothing. That's pretty important, isn't it? The temple is important, the altar is important, but you swear by the altar, that is nothing. But if you swear by the gift of the altar, if you swear by the sacrifice of, you are a debtor. You're going to have to fulfill that promise. And what Jesus is trying to get them to say, see, you didn't escape God. You didn't escape God. Which is greater? The gold in the temple or the temple that sanctifies the gold. Which is greater? Is it the idea of the gift on the altar or the altar that sanctifies the gift? They're all the same. You don't escape God. Jerusalem is the city of the great God of heaven. His earth is his footstool. Heaven is where his throne is. That's where he rules. You do not escape God. It's as if you are saying, I can say something that's really sounds good and important and holy, but I don't have to fulfill that promise. Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. You got to tell the truth. But he wasn't condemning, I'll tell the truth with an oath. He's not condemning that. He's condemning, I will use an oath to avoid the truth. And things like that, James says, is not something that you ought to do, brethren. You fall into condemnation. So this evening I ask you a question. Does God care about invoking his name? Yes, he does. But we say that we can. God has authorized it. But what it is was only for serious occasions. It really is. The only thing to harmonize is I may be in a court of law like Jesus is. And I am going to swear to the authorities of that occasion. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And we put our hand on the Bible. No, James said, don't you ever swear at all. No, he didn't. That would probably be a time to show the earnestness of what you're doing is indeed, I'm standing before God. God is my witness. He knows my heart. That's Paul. And what I'm telling you is the truth. But in everyday life, we're making our promises. We got to swear all the time. That's what James said, no. Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. And no, we bring something important. That means we're really saying something important. It was using God's name in a non-serious situation, because every time Paul wants them to know about the fact his gospel is not something that is just from a flippant person. It's yea, not nay. And that's why he calls God as my witness. Serious times, use a serious name. And you better be telling the truth because God's seeing it. That's to understand that they would know for assurance. That's why God swore by himself. But what's happening, we're just throwing it out there. And then we ask, well, what is profanity? What is profanity? Well, it's profane. It's dirty. It's nasty. Yeah, a lot of it is. But what is the nature of it is that we flippantly use God's name in something that is just a throwaway. Oh, it's especially a throwaway when you bang the hammer on your thumb. We want something to be damned. And the first thing that comes to our mind sometime is put God in front of it. And he will tell you what he wants damned. Oh, I invoked his name all right. And I guess I said an oath. I swore. Yeah, we'd call it that. But the principle you just violated is that you hadn't been thinking about God while you're measuring twice and cut once and all that sort of thing. But boy, when something drastically happened and you didn't like it, that just comes out of your mouth. Oh, we don't want cussing going on, and we don't. There's never any room for that. Never. There's room for taking oaths. But there's never room for the profanity. Because the principle is being violated. You don't take my name in vain. Empty. You don't do that. It's reserved for serious things. But like the Jews, we kind of want to get away from that, and we have euphemisms. And those are nice ways of avoiding saying other things. That we might think in a society, in our culture, that it's not allowed at all. It'll be something that we want to avoid. We wouldn't say this word, but we'll use something that's a little more acceptable. A euphemism. I found a lot of us from the South, we use a word, it's got an SH and a T on the end. It comes out of our mouth regularly when we don't like something. You know where that came from? We just want to avoid another word that we don't like. And I don't think we would say that. I said that, but sometimes brethren can say that too. But we'll substitute a word. And I want to ask you, is that the problem that James is facing here? Well, not euphemisms, but in the old, what's the principle? That I am using language that may be corrupt and it's profanity, and I'm taking God and I'm using His name in vain, but maybe God's name's not in this. And we said, no, I don't want to be identified with that word, but I have found out in living long enough and hearing people, the word shoot stands for another word I never want to say. And so I'm trying to eliminate that out of my vocabulary. Because euphemisms is like saying that word, but we substitute it. We really meant that word sometimes. I don't want people to understand that. I don't want people to think I'm really saying something kind about that. I'm just avoiding the word. The Jews were avoiding the word, temple, Jerusalem. Or they were using God's name in vain. And we have other euphemisms. These seem harmless to you. They probably come out of your mouth. A lot of times that happens among brethren. I remember preaching here one time in the old building. We were trying to build this one. It was very cold, and we only had a plastic sheet or plastic barrier. They were working on this part of the building. We had that, and it was very cold. I preached on euphemisms. And at that time, I didn't want to say the words. I didn't want to say, now, well, you're not saying it, but you sure are writing it up there. Yeah, because apparently you don't get it. Because the moment the last prayer was said, a woman came out and she used one of those words. It's cold in here. You feel like, really, I accomplished a lot today? She didn't say God, but she used a euphemism. Harmless to her. You see Jesus in that first word? You should. That's why it's substitute for. You see God in the next two? You should. That's what a substitute for, but Jiminy? Jiminy Cricket? JC? Jesus Christ? Seems kind of harsh to be condemning that, but it's the principle. I don't want to say Jesus Christ. But you mark the times when people say that, and I don't think it happens much today. That generation's moving on. Some of you don't even know who Jiminy Cricket is. And I think about a little grasshopper. But it comes out of people's mouths having no real meaning other than I am surprised. And instead of saying JC or saying Jesus Christ, we'll just say Jiminy Cricket because they get the message. It's a euphemism. Euphemism for Jesus, euphemism for God. And ladies and gentlemen, those are harmless to people. I hear them coming out of the mouths of Christians. People call themselves Christians. And sometimes you may not know, but my experience is I want you to at least read it. But I don't want to have those in my vocabulary. But I'm telling you, this is the reason why. It's because we're violating the very thing that James is having a problem with their oaths. Oh no, I can't evoke heaven. Heavens. Good heavens, for heaven's sake. Those are all good English words, and they're good Bible words. But why do you call upon heaven? Why do you use that? Is that a phrase that has any meaning? For heaven's sake, what just happened? Somebody was baptized? For heaven's sake? I don't think so. For heaven's sake, you know what you've done for me? You know what you just did to me? That's when I used to hear it out, and I said that. But do you ever think about the words that come out of your mouth? Does God care? Remember, heaven is where God dwells. You do not escape God. Does it have meaning, or is that just a vain throwaway expression when you are surprised or you don't like something? Driving here this evening, not only the man who was doing the interviewing and the woman that was being interviewed. It didn't take me long to get to services. But I heard 4 different euphemisms. FCC didn't shut them down. It was harmless. It came from the mouth of the fellow doing the interview. More than once he said, "Holy cow." Holy cow. I wonder what that's a euphemism for. COW is not GOD. Over in India, it's deity. And it's holy. It's holy. And it came out of his mouth a lot, and he's just a good old boy. He didn't cuss, did he? He didn't swear, did he? He used a euphemism for the idea of substituting the things of God and of deity. And the lady used the second word up there more than once. But she put a my in front of it. My what? Sound like my God. And the Bible speaks about my God. And sometimes it says, oh my God. So what do we write on our text today? Oh, we wouldn't say, oh my God. We don't want to be using God's name, and we surely don't want to be using it in vain, so we avoid it. So what do? We'll just put OMG, and you mark when you put OMG in there. It's when you're surprised, when you're trying to say, this is something great, usually, or something so horrible. And we've got our little new ways of doing euphemisms, OMG. And I can give you some euphemisms that are substituting for what language I wouldn't use that are there. And that's why that makes it great euphemism. I didn't say that word, you did. But where did you lead me to? What did you mean by that? What did you mean by OMG? I've learned through Michael, because I just thought people didn't know how to spell and they didn't finish a word. Sometimes you'll just get a K. Like just say K. I think people are getting lazy. Why don't you say okay? It's too long to do that. And you know what? K has a little meaning too, I found out. So if I ever get one from Michael and he just says K, I know he can spell, and I know he's not, he didn't put a letter there. What it means is K, like I heard you, but I'm moving on. That's what it means. And you know it means that. He told me that. That indeed there is, I don't have time to put O and K, whatever you say, K. Well, it has all sorts of its own meanings. And OMG's right there. And so, I would never want to use God's name in vain. Well, you use it in a vain way because usually that's just a matter of surprise. But you may think I've avoided God, and you didn't. And brethren, James is writing to brethren. And I hope the next time you use that you'll realize I didn't mean, because I'm going to avoid that, before you put that in there, say, on my guard. You use that for those words, those letters. On my guard. I don't want to be violating the principle that drove people to use God's name flippantly without really any meaning. It's just throwing away, using it in a vain way. On my guard. I want my speech to be true and uplifting and godly and pure. And I want to be on my guard that I'm not going to be substituting things and thinking I'm okay because I didn't use God's name in vain. Yes, you did. And sometimes we don't even think about it. I want us to think about it. In fact, James said you better think about it real quickly. At once. Be on guard for this. You need to handle this at once. And it's something that needs to come out into our lives and come out into our speech. God cares about how we speak. He cares about our oaths made with the seriousness of the occasion. They invoke God's name. Always did. And there's times for that to be, but a lot of times in our lives, we're trying to make something more important, than our words and our promises. That's what James is driving at. Let your yea be yea, so you don't fall into condemnation doing the things that we talked about. We won't make euphemisms, or we'll use a word that doesn't have God in it, and we fall into condemnation. Rather than above all things, get busy and deal with this problem. That's what James is telling us, and I hope we will think about it in our words that we speak, in the words we type and we text. And we'll be pure in our language, and we'll be uplifting our language, and we will not profane the name of God, and we'll be the people of God that we should be. There's a place called heaven. And one day we're going to face the judgment, not only the things we've done, but the words that we've spoken. We've seen that this evening. But there's a place called heaven, and our hope in heaven is reserved for us. For us who not only obey the gospel, but those who are going to remain faithful. If you haven't begun your work in serving God, you haven't begun the life of a Christian, we encourage you to become a Christian this evening. Come to Jesus Christ. His blood was shed to take away all of your sins. He was raised to make that affirmation, that promise of God true with Abraham. You're going to be blessed because based upon that resurrection, not only his death, we have the hope of eternal life. As we sing about heaven, put yourself there. Am I going? For those who know not God and obey not the gospel, you won't. And we encourage you to obey the gospel as we stand and as we sing.